weird. It's like if you put money into the arts, artists can succeed. Funny how that works.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Brad King, and I play guitar and yell in a band called Alienator.
And Brad, how would you describe the music of Alienator?
Oh, that's one of the most difficult questions I get asked. I guess we are...
It is going to be the most difficult question I'll ask you today.
We're a heavy, sludgy, noisy, cathartic, hopefully creative band that plays music that hopefully challenges the listener and, helps people get out their aggressions in a good way, I guess.
How do you feel about being described as noise rock or being categorized as noise rock?
I like noise rock a lot. That's one of my major influences. So I think if people mention that might be because that's something that I always sort of put out there. I think the noise rock elements are creeping more in our new material. It's not always there in all of our stuff, but a couple of the newer tunes, definitely that's coming a lot more to the forefront.
And we'll speak about this a little bit more when we speak about your songwriting process. But in terms of the noise rock aspects of your influences coming out more, would you say that your bassist, Sean, has a lot to do with that?
I think the fact that having a bass player like Sean during the writing process has allowed for a lot of that to come out for sure. And it's allowed me to play sort of different stuff rather than just kind of playing along with the riff. Like I found myself asking on a few tunes, what would Dwayne Dennison do here? Trying to do some more sort of Jesus Lizard type guitar over top of what he's doing. Whereas before that wouldn't have been an option. And when I started the band, it was a 2-piece. So there was really sort of no room for that. So, definitely having Sean as part of the writing process and, being a full creative partner, although I don't know that he necessarily has the same frame of reference with a lot of those sort of bands that I am influenced by.
What would you say his background is?
The kind of stuff that we talk about a lot is like prog rock or like 70s, 70s rock sort of stuff. He likes a lot of like bands that he talked about listening to growing up would be like more like old school death metal. I know he liked Pantera a lot growing up, whereas I wasn't as much into that sort of stuff. And then he's got very diverse musical tastes as I do as well. Like one of his favorite bands is Radiohead, and we talk about sort of bands like that. So I wouldn't really sort of be able to pigeonhole his tastes necessarily. It's kind of all over the map like mine, but I don't know that he, has sat down and listened to a whole Jesus Lizard album, for example, or anything like that.
I mean, one of the more interesting things about Alienator, the noise rock aspects definitely come through, but there also seems to be a lot of classic metal, Iron Maiden kind of stuff, with like galloping guitars and guitar harmonies and things like that.
Yeah, Maiden was one of my early influences for sure. I still do enjoy some Iron Maiden. I think some of the gallops and stuff like that were probably a little bit more obvious on the first album, not quite as much on this one to my ear, but yeah, that's a very astute for sure, and it's interesting. Like the first album, as I said, we were a 2-piece, and I was, playing 2-part guitar harmonies and stuff like that. So I think we sort of started off. I like to say we started off as a 2-piece, trying to sound like a 4-piece, and now we're just trying to sound like a 3-piece.
In the Venn diagram between, let's say, the Jesus Lizard or Unsane on one side and, Motorhead and Iron Maiden on the other side, probably the uniting factor would be the bass does a lot of the work moving the song forward, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, for sure. I mean, that's a very good call for sure. Yeah.
Would you say that's the case with Alienator?
I think it's becoming the case for sure. Like the first album that we recorded, it's interesting because it was not only written without a bass, but it was recorded without a bass. So Sean came in and put the bass in afterward. So I was actually, so Sean's our producer. So he records all the albums, and he was working with us only in that capacity on the first album, and then sort of joined the band partway through. So I mean, maybe that's just a testament to the kind of work that he was doing, that those songs that were written even without a bass in mind, could be described as bass driven. But I think with a lot of our newer stuff, because I have a tight and reliable rhythm section, I'm allowing them to do their thing more and take that kind of lead role. And that's kind of what I always wanted, but was just never really able to achieve. So it's interesting. I get maybe not something that a lot of guitar players will admit to, but it's always kind of been my want to have, the rhythm section take center stage in a lot of aspects.
Well, that's the magic of a power trio, right? Like the between what the rhythm section does and the guitar does, there's always a bit of space where the rhythm section tends to be very tight and locked together, which frees up the guitars to do more than just play the riff or create the rhythm with the drums.
Yeah, and we've gotten more into the flow of that. I think this album is traditional in some ways because I think that the stuff that we started writing earlier on in the writing process, I was still following the bass, or the bass was following me, or what have you. So we started off with a couple of tunes that were doing that, and then we just sort of started kind of branching out and expanding from there. And I think it's going to continue. It's continued on with the new things that I've been writing. I think of it in terms of those two different parts rather than just I'll play the riff and the bass will fill it out.
So I definitely want to speak to you more about how you write songs, but I think we should go back to the beginning to when Alienator was a duo.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, what were your goals at the time?
My goals at the time were just to be able to play. So I had moved back. I'd been living in Vancouver for about a dozen years, and I moved back to my hometown of Thunder Bay, and I wasn't sure if I still knew anybody, and it was just a weird, kind of a weird situation, just being dropped into a place that I was, in one sense, familiar with because I'd been born and raised here, but in another sense that most of my friends had left and the city seemed a lot different to me. And I hooked up with a friend of mine, Johnny Naster, who I had played in bands with when I was younger. And my goal was just to get together with him and just play and jam and fool around. And we got together with a guitarist and we played a little bit, and it was all right. It was nothing like the kind of music that we ended up playing. And then, eventually the guitar player just sort of disappeared. And then we decided to just keep going as a two-piece. And rather than just continually looking for a bass player, because my experience has always been I've played with some really good drummers and I've played with some really good bass players, but not usually at the same time. I'm always looking for one or the other. And it was so frustrating. So it's just like, okay, well, let's write some songs or start playing some songs I'd already written. Maybe we'll play some shows, very, very humble beginnings. And then, maybe somebody else will want to join our band. Maybe things will snowball. And I won't say that happened right away. And there was a lot of twists and turns in between. But eventually we did get to the place where we are right now.
Now, from those early sessions as a duo, did you already have a good idea of what you wanted Alienator to sound like?
I had written a lot of tunes when I was back in Vancouver that were kind of a mishmash. Like my initial idea was that I wanted to do stuff that was kind of genre jumping. So have like a new wave of British heavy metal riff going into like something really doomy or stonery, and then stopping on a dime and doing like a sort of ZZ Top riff or something, just sort of a combination of all my influences, but just that sort of a surprising sort of, let's stop on a dime and play something different. And some of the tunes that made it on the first album, which aren't really representative of what we do now, like Reptilian Endoskeleton was one of those. It was, started off with the gallops and they kind of had a doomy midsection. And so we just sort of kind of developed from there. But that's kind of what I wanted to try to do. I didn't want to box myself into any particular style, and I didn't want to get bored. And that was kind of what I thought the early representation of the band could be, which was actually quite ambitious considering there was just two of us. And I was trying to do things like, these two-part guitar harmonies and all this sort of stuff. So.
And as you mentioned, your bassist Sean was originally your producer. He recorded your first album. Did he also record that demo?
He didn't record the demo. No, we did it with another guy locally at a place called Dining Room Studios. So that was before I got to know Sean. I actually knew who Sean was, and I had heard some of his previous recordings, and I didn't know him, hadn't spoken to him or anything like that. And at the time of that demo, I don't know if my confidence was such that I would have been really comfortable asking him to work with us at that point. Things were still a bit rough, and I was still kind of developing my own style, especially with the vocals and stuff like that. So when I listen to that old demo now, I kind of cringe at that. We were just sort of getting started on our way, but it sometimes when you're working on stuff, it's like you know that it's not quite all the way there. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought that, you know, it wasn't quite at the point where it needed to be.
But you knew Sean from his other work. What led you to, or I guess, you know, in recording that first album, what led you to, or led him to record bass for the album?
Well, I was working with our second drummer who played in a band called Norris with Sean, which is the first sort of taste I had of his production. Everybody's like, yeah, this is the, you know, Thunder Bay heavy band that you have to listen to. And I listened to that and I was like, wow, this is, number one, sounds like a real band. And number two, that's an amazing recording. And I think what had happened was we sort of got together, and I knew that Sean played bass and was, you know, very good at it. And we actually had someone else that had offered to try out. And what had happened, I think Sean and I were talking, we were tracking, and he might be able to correct me on this, but I think he said, oh, that's too bad, because I was going to offer. And I was like, oh, man. And then the guy didn't show up. And so I think what happened was, next time I went back to Sean, I said, you know, so-and-so didn't show up. I remember when we were talking about it, you said that you might have wanted to throw your name into the hat there. I wonder if that offer still stands. And he said, yeah. Words to that effect anyway. So that's kind of how that happened.
I mean, not just contributing bass to the recording, but he ended up becoming a full-time member. Was it a natural transition right after the recording, or was there some time when you guys weren't sure if you were going with another bass player?
No, there's never a thought of going with any other bass player. I think we were just, because Sean's always got a number of projects on the go, so the concern would be that maybe that he would be, you know, too busy with other stuff. So that was sort of like, well, hey, you know, now since these songs sound so good with the bass, what do you think about playing a couple of gigs? And he was game. And so we started that process and became a full-fledged member.
now with Sean as a full-fledged member, what's your writing process like?
Well, I think we started refining our writing process. Like when we started, I think I kind of had the idea that we would get in a room more and exchange ideas and come up with parts and stuff like that. I'm not the best improviser. I'm somebody that likes to go home and think about it. So if somebody has an idea, I'll, stew on it for a little bit and come back and I'll have a part sort of composed. So we did a little bit of the sorting it out in the jam space, and we still do that for, refining certain parts. And when our drummer Simon starts to get a hold of stuff and make his suggestions and sort of add to the soup, that's still part of the process. But more and more, we'll bring either fully arranged songs or like large bits of songs into the jam space. And towards the end of the recording, like Sean brought, I think, 3 of the songs like completely arranged. Like The Less Dead, I think there was a demo, just bass. And then I believe Flat Earth Society, it was a demo, just bass. And then he did like all the instruments with a demo of Irreconcilable. And then we just sort of learned that. We're all pretty busy just with lives and jobs and family and sort of stuff like that. So I think we're learning to be a little bit more economical with our time. And if there's more work that can be done at home, I'm realizing that, I have a lot more time at home on my own than I do with the other guys in the jam space. So we just kind of have to maximize our time. So now if I'm able to fully flesh something out more, the better, just because we don't have a ton of time when we do get together. So I think it's moving towards more, and I'll say fully fleshed out, quote unquote, songs being brought to the jam space. Because when we do bring it to the jam space, or when our drummer Simon has listened to it and he comes with his parts, he'll often have a different take on what we're doing, and he'll breathe a different life into it, give it a different vibe or feeling, and bring it in a different direction, and it sort of gives it a new life. Or he'll say, why don't we play this 5 times instead of 4 times or whatever, right? And we'll kind of spiff it up from there. But we have often the real basis of the meat and potatoes of the riffs and stuff.
I'm curious, when you bring in arranged songs to the rehearsal space, are you doing guitar demos, or are you doing like guitars with drum machines, or like what format or how fleshed out are the songs when you bring them to the rest of the band?
Well, for me, I'm getting better at demoing. So Sean, having this studio background, he would have like a click track and a bass usually. But for me, I was making sort of these cheesy garage band demos. And over the pandemic, I learned about Guitar Pro. Well, actually, I knew about it before, but I actually paid for it and learned how to use it properly. And so now I can create with my really kind of basic, like remedial drum programming. I can come up with something that has guitar, bass, and drums on it. But on the past album, the guys had to kind of suffer through my pretty basic skills in demo recording, unfortunately.
So let's jump to talking about Regrets. Regrets is the name of your second album, and it was released at the end of November. We spoke a little bit about how your sound and your songwriting has changed since Sean came aboard. We didn't really speak much about your new drummer, Simon. When did Simon join the band? When and how, I guess, did Simon join the band?
So we parted company with our last drummer shortly after the release of the first album, and we were kind of going through a mental Rolodex of who plays drums in town. And I thought I knew a lot of folks. Like my thought was that if somebody were good, I would know them because they'd be playing out in a band. I just, thought that I would know them. And then Sean said, well, I know this guy, Simon. We used to play botch covers together. And that piqued my interest for a couple of reasons. One, I really like botch. And number two, if you can play that, you can play our music, right? And, if Sean was playing with him, it would be good, right? Like if he was playing botch covers with Sean would know what sounds good, right? So he was able to vouch that this guy knows what he's doing. So the tall man came into our lives. We met and got to know each other, and he learned all of our songs in very, 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 very quickly. And so I think that was maybe like October 2019, and we were playing shows by December. So we really kind of hit the ground running, and we're writing songs, I want to say maybe if not by December, maybe January of 2020. So we hit the ground running, and then everything was kind of full tilt. We're playing shows, and then the brakes kind of got applied with the pandemic. And it was also a bonus too, because he wasn't a known commodity to me. So it was like, okay, well, can you learn these songs? And it was like, yep, could totally do it. And then it was like, okay, well, how are you playing live? And picked it up, super reliable, rock steady, like great. So often when I've been playing, I've had a lot of concern before playing shows about the other people. It's like, geez, is the drummer gonna lag behind, or is the whatever insert the name of the instrument, is this person going to be sober enough to play, or this or that? And now I've only got to worry about myself, not the being sober part, but the like am I gonna be able to live up to my end of the bargain? So that was kind of nice. So yeah, total pro in every aspect. So very pleasant surprise, and that's allowed me to again sit back and play some textures over the top and allow the rhythm section to run away with it sometimes.
That's great. You mentioned that you started work on this possibly at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020. When were you done? When did you have all the songs finished?
Oh boy, I think we have all the songs finished. Well, we went into the studio in February of this year, but I think we had the songs all done by the end of 2021. Like we did pre-production for this album. And I mean, my understanding of dates just with the pandemic are kind of all over the place, so I could be completely wrong about this. But before we went into our first lockdown, I think we had like 7 or 8 songs in various stages of completion. And then we just had to learn the other 3. So I think they were actually written, maybe they were all done being written maybe halfway through 2021 or something like that. That's my best recollection, but I could be off by, several months. I'm sure the other guys will kick me in the ass and tell me I got that wrong.
At the beginning of our conversation, we spoke a little bit about how Alienator sound has been changing, or has changed from the first album to this current album. What would you say the biggest difference is between the 2 albums?
I find that this album is definitely much more cohesive thematically. Like our first album, we had songs about, well, a song about, the reptilians, or like L. Ron Hubbard, or this or that. Like it was a little kind of all over the place, not only musically, but kind of thematically. Whereas this album is, more about personal or social issues. And it has it's just more unified themes and more of a vibe. There's still a lot of differences between, you know, the tempos of different songs, and there's still a lot of variety there, but there's kind of one sort of unified feeling, you know, the kind of dread and claustrophobia that's been bred by the pandemic and the times we're living in.
So as you mentioned, Sean has his own studio, Exit Music.
That's right.
How long did it take for you guys to record the album?
The actual recording of the album, we started in February 2022, and I think we were finally done tweaking it maybe like May or June. So we did a lot of work on pre-production. Like we practiced click tracks. We went through a whole demoing process. So when it came time to actually lay down the tracks, it happened pretty quickly. The reason, and I mean, when people hear that and they're like, well, quickly, and it's like, you know, 6-7 months or whatever, we had the luxury of not having to do it all in one stretch. So Simon did his drums over a couple of days, but I was able to come in, you know, a couple days a week and work on guitar for a couple of hours, like when I had time and things like that. So it went a lot quicker than it has in the past. We sort of found our groove in the studio, but the times that we're able to get together are a lot more spaced out just due to scheduling and things like that. It's not the type of thing where it's like, okay, we're gonna have a month of studio time and we're gonna work 9 to 5, and then it's gonna be done. And I mean, really, I don't know anybody that takes a month in the studio. Usually it'd be more like, you know, we got 5 days of 9 to 5 or whatever. But we had the luxury of being able to space it out and things of that nature. So it came together pretty quickly when it was time to get into the studio.
Sean engineered and mixed the album, but you guys sent it to someone else to master it. Do you want to mention who that person is?
That would be Brad Boatwright of Audio Siege. The man.
And why Brad?
Because he's the man. He's just, I mean, whenever I'm sort of doing, you know, research on who does what on albums, like that's one of the names that kept coming up, and it turned out that, you know, he was somebody that we were able to work with, and he just makes records sound really, really good. So, I mean, I don't know why we would go to anybody else, really.
Did he also work on the first album?
He did, yeah.
I mean, other than making your music sound good, what would you say Brad Boatwright brings to your sound?
He makes it loud, makes it crushing, makes everything pop, allows you to be able to hear all the sort of nuances. When you're filling out your little sheet there with Audio Siege, he asks, are you happy with the mix? In our case, we said yes. So he just amplified everything that we liked about the mix. If, you know, we came in with the terrible mix, then he would have done some fixing and tweaking in post. But since we had a mix that we liked, he just kind of made everything explode in our ear holes.
I mean, that's an interesting, because that's actually come up before. I spoke with a band recently, and they said that the reason, what they wanted from the mastering was for it to sound more like the mix, which is, you know, as somebody who's not really that familiar with the mixing or mastering process, it is kind of a funny thing for me to hear that you sent it to someone else to make it sound more like what it already is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like just seeing it in 3D. It's just like a little, you know, a little bit brighter. It's just you're seeing what's already there, or you're hearing what's already there. So I can totally understand. I can totally understand what that person's saying, for sure.
Sometimes the eyes just got me eyes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what the support you got was from the Canadian Council for the Arts and how they were involved with either the recording or the other aspects of this release?
Yeah, well, I wrote a grant for the recording of the album and 3 videos. I had never written a grant before, and I just thought, okay, well, here goes nothing. So I talked a lot about how we were, geographically sort of positioned in an area where we weren't really able to spread our music live very much, and certainly with the pandemic, and put together a package about what we were about and some of the, I guess, more socially conscious aspects of the music that we were trying to get across and things of that nature, and just how it's important for us to be a positive voice out of the North, and kind of crossed my fingers there, and lo and behold, we were accepted. And so the album recording and the production of the videos was paid for by the Canada Council. I spoke to a friend recently, actually, at our album release show, and they were saying, this is a person who's very involved in the grant game, and they said, yeah, that's the good one, and that's the hard one to get, is Canada Council. Who wrote your grant? And I said, well, that was me. And yeah, I guess I did a good job of it. So that's great. So yeah, we were very thankful to be able to receive that. I should mention that, so it also paid for the artwork and photography and stuff like that. And I should drop the name of our very talented friend Peter David Ragg, who did not only the album layout but did 3 videos on a shoestring and on like almost no time. Like, it was very, very quick turnaround. Like, the deadline, because I'm not used to creating deadlines for myself, I think the deadline that we gave for the production of the album, like for the album to be completed and the videos to be done, were the same. And it's kind of hard to do that when you don't have completed music to go with the video. Like, Peter really stepped up. We had originally wanted to try to put it out to several different videographers, and we realized that we hadn't really budgeted for that. And so Peter stepped up, and he was just interested in the project and wanted to see how he could do with it. And he put 3 really good videos together. One of them's a live video that he added some effects and different stuff to, and then 2 of them we did in a creepy old abandoned grain elevator in the same day, and he was able to get it all spliced together and synced up and really knocked it out of the park.
Now, as far as qualifying for the grant, I understand that your music has to speak about Canada in some way, but not necessarily depict Canada in a positive light, right?
Well, they didn't they didn't necessarily specify that it had to like mention Canada or speak about Canada, but I
Oh, really?
yeah, they just wanted to kind of know what our artistic stance and statement was, and we had to show them something that we'd created, and there had to be they had to agree that it had artistic merit or whatever. And sounding the way that we sound, that's amazing, because it's yeah, it's I don't know if that's the type of thing that they typically fund. I would imagine probably not, but yeah, I think, what you're getting at is some of the stuff that we talked about was racism in Canada, and yeah, maybe not in necessarily the best light, but as well, like, we come from a place, Thunder Bay, that gets a lot of national news here in Canada about racism, either hate crimes or the police being racist. There's a lot of that, like overwhelmingly negative press, and it's deserved for sure. Like, there's rampant racism in the community, and the police, everything that's being said about them and more is true. But it was important for me moving back to this place that I presented us as against that. Like we're from this place, but that doesn't represent who we are. In fact, here's our perspective on that. I worked in the social services for 20 years, so I'm well versed in, Canada's history of colonial violence, and it's something that I see the result of every day in my work. So not only is it something I feel comfortable speaking up about, but it really reflects my personal experience as a white settler, being complicit in that, and also trying to help deal with that fallout in what small way I'm able to.
I'm curious, are the grants from the Arts Council something that a lot of DIY bands take advantage of?
I'm not sure. I do not think so. It's a bit of a daunting and intimidating process. Factor is the one that I always hear about, but I often hear about how difficult it is to get Factor grants as well. There's a couple of, I know the band Zom from Moncton have done a lot of stuff with grants. I think Gribert may have gotten a Canada Council grant on their new album. It does happen, but I think a lot of bands are probably intimidated to begin that process. And then once you get accepted, well, then you've got to do all the stuff. So then it was like, oh God, okay, well, we got to make these 3 videos. Who are we going to get to do this? How are we going to do this? What's our timeline? What's our budget? You got to, you have spreadsheets and all the rest of it. You got to write a report. I'm somewhat comfortable writing some of these things, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't a stressful process for sure. It took a lot of the pressure off in terms of funding the thing, because I had to scrape and strain to get the money together for the first recording. But it's a lot of other, it's a lot of added pressure to actually complete the work and complete it on time and save all your receipts, all that sort of stuff in case you get audited. So it's wasn't easy peasy. Like now that I've got one under my belt, I'm like, okay, I know what to expect, and I won't be quite as stressful next time if we're able to get another one. But yeah, it wasn't the easiest process for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I just need to clarify something. As far as the videos go, was the grant reliant on you creating videos, or were the videos something that you guys had planned to promote the album anyways?
It was my understanding that videos are a good way to promote what you're doing, and there was no, like, as far as the specific grant that we applied for, it was just any sort of a media, anything. Like it wasn't an album grant, it wasn't a video grant. It was, you could propose pretty much anything. So I thought doing a multimedia proposal was probably our best angle to make it interesting. So not only would we have this piece of audio, but we would be able to promote it, via the internet or whatever through these videos. So I sort of made a case for that. So because I had proposed that, then that was what, we had to do. But I could have made a proposal for just an album or just anything. But it was my understanding, and I spoke to some folks at Canada Council just kind of about my ideas, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds interesting. I had called them promotional videos at first, and they're like, no, you don't want to say that. Like, it's an artistic video, like it's part of your like art, right? And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. So I had to be careful about that. It's not promotional. It's part of your, artistic vision and part of the package. So I learned that. But yeah, it was our own parameters, or the parameters that I put in place. I just didn't realize what, videography costs and how much time it takes and all the rest of it. So thanks again, Peter, for putting up with us.
And did the grant also help with the production of the CDs, the physical releases?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And the promotion, I built that all into the budget. So when you're applying for a grant, you look at all the different aspects. What do you need? I've since learned that sometimes you can build merch into a grant. I didn't think about that. I might have put some t-shirt money in or whatever. But at the time I was just like, okay, well, let's throw this together at a reasonable, cost and see what happens. And I had zero expectations.
That's great. I mean, this is fascinating to me, and also a little bit funny, just because I think something people overlook about, we were talking about the, old school death metal at the beginning of our conversation. A lot of people don't realize that one of the reasons why so many bands came out of Scandinavia and the Nordic countries in the late 80s, early 90s is because they were actually getting government support to rent rehearsal spaces and, rent equipment. And that's also one of the reasons why those bands were all so young. Like most of them were teenagers when they first started, was because, these were basically after school programs to keep kids off the streets. And that's why there's so many Swedish death metal bands.
I didn't know about the after school program part of it, but yeah, so my frame of reference was more like Turbo Negro and Glucifer and Helicopters and stuff like that. And yeah, they had touring grants for these bands to come to North America. It's weird. It's like if you put money into the arts, artists can succeed. Funny how that works. Yeah, it's great, and that's why there was this explosion of like you say, these Scandinavian bands. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, something people should think about when they talk about the evils of socialism. Socialism literally brought us Norwegian black metal and Swedish death metal.
Yeah, man, I'm all about it.
Maybe I should apply for a grant.
You really should. You really should. Yeah. Well, if you need any tips, apparently I'm okay at it. So yeah, let me know.
Wrapping up, what's next for you guys?
Oh, good question. I want to start writing another album. I want to get to work on that. I really enjoyed being able to devote the time to being creative and writing music, and I developed better writing habits over the pandemic. So I want to start creating more music. I think we're gonna, probably play some shows here or there, but I mean, we're just, playing locally within our small market. So, I don't want people to get too sick of us. I like it when it's something special playing a show. If you're, playing every week or playing every other week, it's not that. And it's kind of a fine balance between keeping your live chops up and kind of overexposing yourself. So I'm hoping that we can hole up a little bit over the winter and start working on some new material. And yeah, that's going to be probably my top priority for the band.
So Regrets is out now. Brad, how can people order the album?
Well, they can check out our Bandcamp. So we are Alienator Band. We have a very small number of compact discs available if people still make use of that technology. And if not, they can certainly download the digital. We're on all the platforms, but if you want to buy our stuff, it would be through our Bandcamp right now.
And I should mention the 2 albums are available on Bandcamp as Name Your Price downloads. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Chuck us a few bucks if you feel that we're worthy.
And if people want to follow Alienator online, what's the best way to do that?
Alienator Band. If they want to go on the old F book, it's facebook.com/Alienator Band. I prefer Instagram @Alienator Band. And we got a YouTube now. You can check out our video for the song The Priest, and we got 2 more videos coming down the pike. So if you want to follow us on YouTube or YouTube Music, please do so.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think, I think we covered it all. I want to thank you very much for having me on. It's been a great discussion, and I really appreciate your support.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.